Welcome everybody to another edition of Tales from the Jar Side, the video series. Not interested in reading my newsletter this week? That's okay, I'll read it to you. So let's get right into it. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side, the newsletter. My name is Ken Cousin. I'm the owner, president of Cousin IT Incorporated. This is my free weekly newsletter. Let me give you some idea of what's in here. The title says, Tales from the Jar Side, Mockito saved me some work, or it should have, but it didn't. It was my mistake. A Java ecosystem survey and Java I/O idioms, two separate entries there. Turns out Medium doesn't pay much for articles. I know you're shocked, aren't you? And bring me the head of Erwin Schrödinger in Tweets and Toots, among others. The subtitle this week is Yesterday I Ate a Clock. It was very time consuming. Wait, forgot. InstantRimshot.com. There we go. And especially when I went back for seconds. Here we go again. How about that? 2 in 1 line. Okay. As an aside, last week some of the images didn't come through for some weird reason, and I commented on that in last week's video, so I showed you they were all there in the editor. So I don't know what happened, and there's no way to update a newsletter without just resending it, and I didn't want to resend it to everybody again. This week we didn't have that problem, so good. Welcome, fellow jarheads, to Tales from the Jar Side, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of April 30th to May 7th, 2023. This week I taught my Managing Your Manager course, which was fun, although I didn't comment on it in the newsletter this time, and my Java Testing with JUnit 5 course, both on the O'Reilly Learning platform. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than the average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the given button. The YouTube channel, let's just take a look at the status of that. Here's Tales from the Jar Side, the YouTube channel, and I'm up to 258 subscribers today. So, hey, making progress. That's good, getting there. First section here is about a video I published on using a Mockito spy with loggers. So there's a video embedded in here called Spying on a Logger, how to use spies in Mockito. Let me give you an idea what was in that, and then I'll show you the part that I did not put in the video. So the basic idea is that in my class, in my JUnit class this week, someone asked about testing a class that also invoked a logger. It invoked the info method or the debug method on an individual logger. And I pointed out you could handle that with a Mockito spy. That's exactly what they're for. So here's a quick demo. So I have my logging demo here as part of the GitHub repository for the Mockito Made Clear book. And this allows me to inject a logger via a constructor argument, and I have a doStuff method that prints something to standard out, and this is the method I'm interested in. I want to invoke info on the logger with some message. Now, the way to use Mockito with this is like this. First of all, if we instantiate the logging demo and plug in a logger, just a regular logger, there's really nothing to test because the doStuff method I just showed you doesn't return anything, and the logger doesn't return anything either. I mean, it's got a side effect. It's printing to standard error or standard out. In this case, I get both of them, but that's not helpful. There's nothing testable there right away. So all I did is I wrapped it in an assert does not throw just to show it didn't throw an exception. Great. But here's how you use a Mockito spy with it. I'll wrap a spy around that logger. That's the spy method from Mockito. And then I can plug it in as usual. And when I call doStuff this time, I can verify that on the spy, the info method was invoked with the argument hello world exactly once. I could have written out the ×1 itself, but that's assumed if you don't put in a times method. And great, we got it. The thing is, though, is everybody was kind of focused on capturing the output here because they were trying to test it by seeing that the output appeared. And it turns out there are ways to do that. I wrote a little test here called test log with the standard error, and you could create a couple of byte array output streams and wrap them in a print stream and set system.out and error to those so that when I invoke the method, I can capture those streams and see that they do in fact have what I want and then reset them. And that's all fine. It also turns out if you're willing to use the Spring framework, the Spring framework has this extension called an output capture extension. That allows me to put this argument of type captured output in the test, and that will let me go ahead and say, hey, get the output stream and it should contain this, and get the error stream and it should contain that. And all those things work just fine. Although I'm really minimizing the amount of time it took to let me come up with those. The problem is, and I never did resolve that, if for some reason I put both those tests in the same class, I have a problem. Let me run this test here with both of them in the same test and same class, and you see that the one that ran first passed and the one that ran second failed. And I could switch the order here. I'm using the order annotation from JUnit. So I switched them in the order and I run it again. And now the other one passes because it ran first and the other one didn't. And I have no idea why. So in the results, in the actual output, I just put them in separate classes and that came out fine. But then came the critical realization. Why am I capturing the output? I mean, all that's doing is testing the logging framework. Is the logging framework writing to standard out or standard error? And that's not my job. That's the job of the people who wrote the framework. All I need to do is what I did in this original one, verify that the info method on the spy was invoked with the right argument. And the rest is up to the framework. In other words, I could have done the whole thing in this one-liner, basically, the way I set it up. Well, one small implementation here. But I spent, oh my goodness, hours, maybe even days, trying to figure out how to capture the output and still never resolve that one particular problem. Oh well. So at any rate, most of that is in the actual video, just not the part about having to run first. That part, if I scroll down here, I discussed myself. Now, by the way, if you look at JUnit's documentation, it also has a section on how to capture standard output and error, and it refers to this test execution listener and setting a configuration parameter to true, and it even has a class in it in the platform section called a logging listener, and nothing I did made that work. I still have no idea what to do with that. I wound up writing a question. Let me just scroll down here. I wound up writing a question on the, I missed it here, on the Stack Overflow, and nobody answered it, which was a bad sign. And then I went to the Gitter group that JUnit 5 maintains and asked it there, and nobody answered that either. So either I've hit something really esoteric, or nobody knows how to do this. I don't know what that class is. I tried browsing the source code for JUnit. Pardon me. No, that's right, for JUnit in the GitHub repository, and there were no tests for that class called logging listener. And my test execution listener tests, or the test executioner test, listener tests in the GitHub repository didn't cover this case. So I don't know what's going on with all that. And again, it was just hours of wasted time because I couldn't let go of it. Okay, that's enough of that. And the bottom line was the old Jeff Goldblum quote from Jurassic Park. You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could, you didn't stop to think if you should. And I didn't have to do it. Again, the verify was enough. There was no need to go on. So now I know. Incidentally, I pointed out, I was so desperate, I even asked ChatGPT and even Google's Bard, how do I use logging listener to test for standard output and standard error? And the answers it gave me were completely wrong. And when I pointed out they were completely wrong, it apologized and rephrased it and said basically the same thing over again. I must have gone through 4 iterations with ChatGPT before I gave up on it. And it's like, oh well, so much for I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised. After all, this is not a common problem, and the neural networks are better at generalizing from things that happen all the time. This doesn't. So, okay. Moving on to our next section. This section regards the Java Developer Survey for 2022 that was created or released by JetBrains. Now, this was part of a much larger survey. You could see all the different pieces in here. They go through various different languages, Python, Ruby, Rust, databases, data science, embedded, everything, and even key takeaways. I went directly to the Java part because that's kind of where I live. Either Java or Groovy or Kotlin. They did have a special one for Kotlin, of course, because they're a Kotlin company. They created Kotlin. The interesting facts, I don't want to go through the whole thing now. I'll just point out what I noticed in here and made a few comments on. First of all, usage of Java 7 has apparently reached 30%. Now, this is a somewhat self-selective group. These are people who chose to answer a JetBrains Java survey. But still, I have seen it grow in the past year. That's anecdotal, of course, but it's supported apparently by this. I didn't know they'd broken out of the 20s yet, and apparently they've hit 30. The claim was that if you look at last year, Java 11 share went from 42% to 48%, so that's almost half. And then Java 8 dropped from 72 to 60. Now, I don't know why I assume those numbers are going to add to 100, because it turns out that lots of people apparently are using multiple Java versions. And of course they are. What's the problem there? Yeah, even I use multiple Java versions. So at least, when I see 48 and 30 and 6, I mean, I'm way above 100 at this point, but it doesn't matter. It's just a lot of people are using multiple ones. Of course, the next LTS version, the long-term support version of Java, comes out this September. That'll be Java 21, and it'll be kind of sad to see how many people are still stuck on Java 8 at that point. Among the unit testing frameworks, JUnit was at a whopping 86%, and I thought that was a lot until I thought about it and thought, actually, that seems low. JUnit is by far the most popular unit testing framework in the Java world. Everybody uses it. So I wonder who those 14% of developers are that aren't using it. Maybe they're using something else. It could be. I hope they're doing some testing at all. At any rate, Mockito is second at 46%, and I found that quite reassuring because occasionally people will ask me why I chose Mockito as the framework to write a book about instead of, say, PowerMock or EasyMock or any of the others, and this kind of explains it. It's by far the most pervasive one in the industry, and it's the subject of my book, Mockito Made Clear, which, by the way, I believe is going to be on a big sale this week. It's just coming out. I think the sale will be announced either tomorrow or Wednesday, so I can't mention it now, but I mean, I don't know what the value will be, but they've been running a, quote, spring sale every week in the spring, and they pick a handful of books, and I believe this one will be part of the sale this week. In terms of web frameworks, Spring Boot was first and Spring MVC was second. Again, the numbers were over 100% there. But what that tells me is that Spring is really pervasive. That's all over the place. Again, that's pretty consistent. A lot of my work is teaching Spring-related courses, so and they tend to fill, so I'm not terribly surprised there. I was a little disappointed to see that both Quarkus and Micronaut were in the small single digits. Micronaut at 3%, Quarkus at 4%. I put Micronaut first because I really favor Micronaut over Quarkus, but that's me. But neither one of them was very big, and poor old Grails, which practically funded my company for about 3 or 4 years there in the early 2010s, that was down to 1%, and I guess I should be glad it was on there at all. Oh well. But okay, I backed the right horse by spending time on Spring Boot in spring. Among the build systems, Maven's still hovering in the mid-70s. It's about 73%. That's consistent with what I'm seeing. Gradle, however, apparently is up to 50%. Once again, I keep forgetting that these numbers don't have to sum to 100. And that's pretty good. That's actually probably, I'm guessing, the highest Gradle has ever achieved. I don't know for sure, but that seems like a pretty good number for them. Gradle is now the default on the Spring Boot initializer. If you look at start.spring.io, you'll see that they have Gradle as the default choice. What I do expect to change is that the Groovy DSL in Gradle is the default now. I think the Kotlin DSL is going to be the default pretty soon. In Android, they still haven't switched to the Kotlin DSL as the default, but that's coming in the next version of Android Studio. I expect Spring probably will follow suit. Be interesting to see what that does to the adoption numbers. In terms of the IDEs, the development environments, 78% of developers use IntelliJ IDE, with only 8% on Eclipse or Eclipse-based tools. And VS Code users were tiny. They were at 5%. Now, again, this is a JetBrains survey, so people who use JetBrains tools like IntelliJ IDEA are likely to be the respondents. So that's probably an exaggeration, but it's probably not completely out of line, and that makes me surprised. I didn't expect the adoption to be quite that big, but this is a field that's changed pretty rapidly. There were a lot of other categories. There was a neat one at the end, though, that said, what kind of learning content do you prefer? And that split evenly between video at 49% and written at 49%. And I'm thinking, okay, I guess I picked the right time to make a YouTube channel. I mean, I've been doing written stuff for a long time, all those books and everything, although people are telling me, yeah, nobody's buying books anymore. So we'll see. But now I've got video and written, so hey, got the newsletter covered on both sides. That's all good. Of course, that's from last year's data. We're already in May of 2023. Now I'm looking for new surveys again. I just want to get more data on that. Okay, let's move to the next section. There was a neat little blog post by Kay Horseman on Java I/O idioms. I found out about this because of the Java Annotated Monthly. This is something that JetBrains puts out, and Trisha G used to write it, and I always liked that because she had a tendency to occasionally include some of my articles in there from Tales from the Jar side, but also it was very good as well. At any rate, now Irina Mariasova, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but the American pronunciation is usually off. So usually the Ivanova, the pronunciation is on the second syllable. So it's probably Mariasova, if I'm even in the ballpark there. At any rate, she wrote it, and I thought it was very good this month. It really helped a lot. And one of the articles they mentioned was, in fact, this article by Kay Horseman called An Incomplete Guide to Modern Java I/O Idioms. And it's really an interesting thing because I fell right into that trap of, he points out this code that he saw show up in an article at April 2023 edition of this JetBrains newsletter saying a complete guide to how to convert input stream to string in Java. And they pointed out with this code, and yeah, this is exactly how I would think about it because that's how I learned it. I mean, it's been 20 years or more, but that was the basic idea. And he says, hello, it's 2023. There's a read string method, already. And or even down here, they point out, you could just go in.read all bytes, for example. And as long as you got the standard character set for UTF-8, you got it in one line. Or here you can call read all lines on the files method. Now I've used the lines method when I'm dealing with a stream. So I put that in a try with resources block, but I keep forgetting there's a read all lines method. And what's mildly embarrassing about this is, hey, I wrote a book about this stuff. My modern Java recipes book here has that business about the read lines with a stream. But I don't think I said anything about read all lines or anything like that. In this book, I was mostly focused on streams and lambdas and method references, but I'm just giving an excuse. The bottom line is it's one of those cases where once you know how to do something, you kind of sometimes just miss when there's suddenly a better way and didn't even notice. So, okay, now I know. So that was a good article. That's why I pointed it out. Let's move to the next section. About a month ago, I joined the partnership program on Medium. Now, Medium is a proprietary program, and I didn't really want to use it very much because the articles are not free to everybody. You get a certain number of free articles a month, and then they are paywalled. But the pragmatic programmers who published my last two books, they have a publication there called Pragmatic Programmers. And I generally write articles to support that publication and to support whatever book I happen to be on. I have a whole series of articles now on Mockito. And it turned out about a month ago, I was able to join the partner program and therefore make a tiny amount of money based on people clicking on the article. Well, this is the first time I got my first deposit through Stripe or whatever. And here's the little snapshot of the earnings I got on my one article that qualified in that month, Mockito versus BDD Mockito. Apparently, I made a whopping 84 cents on all of that. I think that came down to like 160 clicks or something like that. And I put in the, I'm rich, I'm a happy miser from the Bugs Bunny Daffy Duck cartoon, so feel free to put that in there. Oh, it was 129 views. I think there's more now. At any rate, May's off to a good start, saying I'm up to a whopping 22 cents for May. The sky is clearly the limit. At some point, I could be making whole dollars, but that's a long way away. Still, as the saying goes, the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. On a related note, the Medium article that came out for me this week is this one on mocking final classes and final methods. So again, this is in Medium as part of the, where does it show the Pragmatic Programmers publication? So this was published in the Pragmatic Programmers publication. I don't know how many views are on it. I've got a bunch of claps. That's good to know. And that is based on a video. Now, the video is free to everybody, so you can go take a look at that if you're interested. But then I discuss all the details in the article, plus talk a little bit about what happens when you try to do a partial mock and everything. And at any rate, it's interesting if you want to see it. Okay, so much for that. Let's move on to our weekly Tweets and Toots. So first of all, there's a writer's strike going on, if you're not aware. The Writers Guild of America, representing about 11,500 writers of TV and film, are currently on strike. I linked to I sent a gift link to the New York Times, so you can read it if you want. It's not a great article. It's mostly just a quick summary. Basically, the two major issues are, first of all, streaming income is not subject to the same royalties, or at least not the same royalty arrangement that they get for TV and video. And that's a problem. I mean, the musicians are already getting clobbered by this. Spotify pays practically nothing, whereas the writers don't want to be subject to the same agreement. And the other problem is the rise of the AI tools like ChatGPT, etc., that the studios think, well, we could have that write our basic script and then have the writers, quote, polish it for significantly less money. So obviously the writers cannot tolerate this. It's going to put them out of business. So I did put in the comment here, as a quick aside, if I want to be supportive of the writers' strike, and I do, then should I be writing and publishing? And the answer I decided was yes, because I'm not part of that union. I'm not crossing a picket line. I'm not writing anything that's a screenplay or whatever like that. And nothing I do has any bearing anyway on what they're doing. I just will publicly point out that I support them. And if there's some way I can support the strike more directly, I will do so. I think this is going to go on a while. It's very difficult to get wealthy people to give up any money at all. And the last writer's strike went on a good 6 months, so we'll see. On a plus side, this article at NPR had some great pictures of some of the signs from the strike, like this one: succession without writers is just The Apprentice. Boy, that's harsh. True, but harsh. Or this one: wrote ChatGPT this. Very good. Let's replace studio execs with AI. Yeah, how could they do any worse, right? Or give up just one yacht. Yeah. I thought they were a riot. So we'll see how that goes. Babylon 5 is supposedly in negotiations for the reimagining or whatever they're going to call it. All that's on hold. until the strike is resolved. The creator of Babylon 5, JMS, J. Michael Straczynski, or Joe as he is referred to, apparently announced that there is a Babylon 5 animated movie coming out, and he was quick to point out that he supports the writer's strike, but animation writers, for historical reasons, are not part of the same union, even though they've tried for years to become part, but they're not. And by the way, the film's already recorded. It's done. I mean, there's nothing, everything was finished long before the strike started, so it's just a question of broadcasting it. So Warner Bros. Will be making an announcement about when that's happening and what the networks are and what the title is, which he blocked out here. All of that should be coming hopefully in the next week or so. I'm really ready for that. Speaking of AI, I posted this. This article's been making the rounds and it's excellent. I agree with it. But again, I phrase it this way. The real risk with AI isn't that it can do your job. I mean, we know it can't. But the risk is that your manager will think it can and make hiring decisions based on that. This is an article in the New Yorker called "Will AI Become the New McKinsey?" Now, I can click on this, but I suspect I've used up my free article, singular, for May. Oh, apparently not. There it is. Oh, there's my one free article. So at any rate, the article was called "Will AI Become the New McKinsey?" And this is written by Ted Chiang, who's a fantastic science fiction writer. You may be familiar with him as the one who wrote the novella that was later adapted into the movie Arrival, which was brilliant. At any rate, it's an excellent article, and what it really does point out, McKinsey that they're referring to there was known as, the nickname was capital CAL, TAL rather, willing executioners, because they did the dirty work. A business would want to get rid of a bunch of people, and they'd bring in McKinsey to come up with a reason why they should all be let go, and it might even do the layoffs deliberately. It's a lot like Office Space, bring in the consultants so that you interview for your own job and then they get rid of you. So they also, by the way, just to show you where McKinsey's head is at, as they say, they're the ones who advised Purdue Pharma to turbocharge sales of OxyContin during the opioid epidemic. That's what the article quoted. So they're, not good. And the thought is that a lot of companies are salivating at the idea of using these AI tools, again, to cut employment, to get rid of people. People are expensive and difficult, and the AI tool will do whatever you want, supposedly. So we'll see how that goes, but it was an excellent article. I did note that one thing was really interesting. They pointed out that in the education space, now this is academic education as opposed to the training classes I teach, the stock price of the company called Chegg, CHEGG, which is what they call an education technology company, but it's a way to help students, do homework assignments and tests and quizzes and things like that. At any rate, their stock price dropped almost in half when their CEO told investors students are already switching to ChatGPT. They're not even going there anymore. Of course, he later came out and said, oh, no, it's not that bad, and we're going to make our own tool backed by GPT-4. But of course they are. So we're going to see how that goes. I like this toot that was sent up. It said, the reaction in academia to the need to change assessment practice in light of ChatGPT reminds me of this joke. How many academics does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, what do you mean, change? Right. We'll see. Again, I'm teaching a class at Trinity College in Hartford in the fall, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to handle this issue. But I'm going to try to incorporate it. I mean, there's no avoiding it at this point, and frankly, real developers don't avoid it. I imagine it's what it's doing is making a big dent in accesses to Stack Overflow. It didn't help me this week, as I pointed out, but I'm not trying to do something routine. And tests and quizzes tend to test routine things. We'll see. Maybe oral exams for coders? That seems awkward. It's in our future. Next one, Schrodinger's cat is not happy. It had this great picture, and the subtitle basically was, Bring me Schrodinger's head. Which, of course, I would have phrased as, Bring me the head of Erwin Schrödinger. That's more in keeping with the illusion there. But, hey, the cat's angry. I get it. Speaking of cats, or at least cat pictures, this was great. It said, I told the cat many times to stop opening interdimensional portals in the house. You could see that there's a great prism effect going on through the window, presumably, that the cat is in front of, sitting in the light beam. So I thought that looked great. Yeah, I hate it when that happens. One interesting good thing about AI is someone had AI generate Alien, the musical, and it looked incredible. So this one I actually did link to. I don't normally link to Twitter things anymore, but I wanted you to see those pictures. There's a duet apparently between Sigourney Weaver and the Queen, and here's, wow, that part of the dance number, and of course the solo by one of the aliens and everything. I thought that looked fantastic. So I do need that musical. I hope the strike is over soon so that they can create that. Finally, on May the 4th, the old gag, May the 4th be with you and everything, LeVar Burton reposted the one he posts every year, which is Happy Star Wars Day, and it's good old Mark Hamill holding the sign saying, May LaForge be with you, which, awesome. I mean, who knew that Luke Skywalker, as whiny a brat as ever starred in a movie, could turn out to be such a cool character? Although, really, it's Mark Hamill who turned out to be a cool character, so that's good. Have a great week, everybody. The training classes are listed there. This week I've got a latest features in Java course, and I'm doing a bunch of recordings. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you very much. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the newsletter and or the YouTube channel. And I will see you all again next week. Take care.